All right, I will start with comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. All right, seeing none, we will move on to any amendments.
No amendments tonight.
All right, moving right along, announcements and our student rep report.
Hi. So one thing I want to know, congratulations to senior Vera Escaja Heiss for being the Vermont State Poetry Out Loud champion. That's 2 years in a row now that she's won in our state, and that's awesome. She's a senior this year. Last week there was Chamberlain held its annual family night, and I know Mr. Young again was there serving as a mentor for the kids.
So did you say, I'm sorry, Vera won
The Poetry Out Loud.
The state champions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thing I wanted to know that I've been working on was the climate survey thing that I've been dealing with. This week that survey's being conducted, and so results and information will be in my hands soon as probably next week. So that deals with the other paper articles, which that data I'll use, or we'll both use when we write that article. So that's happening like this week, which is good and exciting. And then also yesterday, SPHS introduced a new sport called Unified Basketball. Yesterday was the first game against Colchester here at home. The purpose of Unified Sports is to create a unique team bonding experience through authentic competitive experiences tailored the appropriate skill development ability of level participants. And I actually went to the game yesterday, and I thought it was awesome to see some senior Colchester and SB students helping out with that event. And I know the track team also stayed for the first quarter. That was awesome. Please join the South Burlington School District Healthy School Program and the South Burlington Community Library at a Vermont Reads event on Thursday, April 4th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the Tuttle Middle School cafeteria to discuss the book March, Book 1. The evening is part of an annual Vermont Humanities Council Vermont Reads program where communities across Vermont read the same book and participate in activities connected to themes in the book. The event is free and open to the public. Refreshments will be provided. To reserve a spot or to obtain a copy of the book before the event, please contact Healthy Schools Coordinator Susie Merrick at 652-7035. And then also the K through 12 Champlain Valley Regional Art Show is at the South Burlington University Mall through April 12th. Exhibits from South Burlington students can be found near Kohl's.
So about 2 weeks ago, South Burlington Drama went to the Vermont One Act Festival, and in turn we received 6 awards. Our overall show got Best Comedic Timing. Students Molly Allen, Nathaniel Barack Hoffman, and myself won awards in Excellence in Acting, and Faith LeDuc and Hunter Delaney got awards in co-directing. And so that was awesome. The South Burlington Visual and Performing Arts Gala is this Saturday at the Trader Duke's Hotel. And then Hofstra University singers are coming tomorrow to work with students at the high school. There is a band concert on the 31st of March. The Bernie Sanders concert is a following week, which is awesome. Senator Sanders will be at our high school, and it's just a whole bunch of music. Students are singing and performing. If you can make it, that's awesome. I believe it is on the 6th of April. So if you can make it, that's an awesome opportunity. And then we have a mental health assembly on the 28th, which I believe is run by the guidance department. Mm-hmm. There's so much more. The Vermont State.
Pause on that one, Cole, for a second. So
Yeah.
John Broderick, he's a speaker who has been traveling. I think I may have told the board, he's a retired Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court. He's retired, but he's traveling around talking about mental health and destigmatizing, and that's on the 28th. I think there's 2 showings, and the second one is at 2. If any board member wants to go to that, it's about an hour long, but happy to have you join. And again, I've heard him a couple times, and he's really excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cole. Sorry.
No. So the Vermont State Science and Math Fair is on the 30th, and a lot of students at SB go, including students from the middle school, and it's always a great time. And then the 8th grade science fair was yesterday in the cafeteria.
Congrats on your award.
Thank you.
And I think Arnell seniors got first in talent night.
Seniors got first in talent night. Juniors got a close second, though. So it was a fun weekend. Yeah.
Good. Great. Any other announcements? did this get announced here?
Yeah, that was that. Actually, I don't think you did it. Paula Ralston is a speaker. That's one of the brochures too, on the overview of adolescent brain development. So again, you're welcome to attend that. That's April 9th, 6:30 to 8 in the auditorium at the high school. Paula Ralston, she's one of our school psychologists. Mhm.
Good. Seeing nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item 6, city and school collaboration.
So, this morning, we had a city meeting with Justin Rabideau, Alana Blanchard, and a representative from Engelberth, with a primary objective to really just talk about specific plans related to Market Street and some of the planned improvements around Rick Marcotte, including the parking lot. This was really about a phasing process, phasing conversation, affected areas that would be affected. So it was really just providing us with an overview, if you will, information about that. The meeting did not last very long this morning, probably half hour or so. That was where we're at. As far as our collaboration meeting, we do have one on Friday, although I know that Helen can't make Friday, so you and I will have to talk about whether we still want to meet with Kevin or not, and I'll be back in touch with you, Elizabeth. So that's really all I have. Under my report, I have a couple other items related to the Rick Marcotte, but.
And I did note that there's some signs up that Market Street's going to be closed again starting April 1st.
Right, and so that's exactly right. Obviously, we won't there won't be restricted access in and out of the Rick Marcotte, but you won't be able to go easterly out of Rick Marcotte. I don't know, is that right, Gary? Anything else? Yeah.
Just like the last closure, Dorset Street will be the access direction for Rick Marcotte.
And does that
Have they said, are they
affect,
gonna throw any pavement down between Dorset
Well,
Street and the entrance?
they got-
Because it's
I
not
mean,
really on a road at the moment.
Potholes right now are, if you drive around the
they're
city,
deep.
potholes are a main part of the decoration of a lot of the city. So Justin, we didn't get into that, but they're very aware of some of the difficulties. I think they're trying to get things dried up a little bit and get an attack on that. They have a little bit of inclement weather coming. We do, not they, but we do. Thursday, Friday, maybe a little bit of snow again, but it'll be short-lived. That's really what's been hard, the really extreme cold temperatures and the warm-up and then the plows on the roads and has been hard. But yeah, clearly, we have some spots that are dangerous for cars, if you aren't navigating around the holes.
That's our version of mud season.
Yes.
We don't have dirt roads.
That's right, yeah, that's right, Martin.
Pothole
Potholes.
season instead.
So is that going to affect the school bus schedule? It will not. Okay, thanks.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the superintendent's report.
So I got 3 items that are addressed here. One is an update on the sound mitigation at Chamberlain. The other is the Rick Marcotte Central School Land Exchange. And then also an update on the agreement for charges on our use of school facilities. So I'm going to ask Gary to talk to the first 2, or the first and the third, actually, sound, and then the facility use.
I just wanted to update the board that we've been doing some contingency planning around sound mitigation at Chamberlain School, based on the ATC study that we conducted last year, the arrival schedule for the new aircraft in the area, and we just are contingency planning for multiple avenues to mitigate sound before students come back in the fall.
Thanks, Gary. And then facility use agreement, can you update that?
Just an information item. I've been working with David Young and our whole facilities crew to simplify and to make a minor adjustment on our facilities use agreement and charges. The bottom line is we simplified the myriad of categories that a group could fall in for pricing and made that more efficient by categorizing groups only as nonprofit and for-profit. And we have made a very minimal overall increase in the amount that we're charging. A lot of categories actually went down. We evaluated schools in Chittenden County to see what they were paying, and we are comparable with all of those. Process is simpler, will be easier for people who want to use the facility to understand, and much easier for us to make decisions on categorizing the groups that are using our
That's in their
facilities.
packet, Gary. Again, we included it. We just wanted you to be able to, if you had any questions on it. We weren't asking, I'm not asking for a decision by the board. It's really just updating our facility use, and wanted to be transparent about it with you.
Big difference, just that there's no distinction now between in South Burlington and outside of South Burlington? Is that basically the simplification?
That's basically the difference, but there were several categories, and you can look at them on the old schedule.
Yeah.
That people could really interpret to try to suggest what category they were in, and then we would have to make a decision, well, is that actually correct, or is it not correct? And so it created some, difficult conversations that we thought were kind of unnecessary.
Thank you, Gary. And then the middle bullet point here on the Rick Marcotte School Land Exchange. I had updated you folks in the past that we had gone out for an independent review specific to how to mitigate stormwater. And we had contracted with Stone Environmental, and we received that report today, a little bit after the noon hour. So we haven't really had a chance to dig into it, but we will be doing that. Again, this is, specific to compliance measures related to stormwater mitigation on school and municipality properties within a city or within the communities around. So we'll be digging into that, and we'll come back to the board around where we are with what that tells us. I don't know if anybody has any questions. No
Anything
questions?
else?
Yeah, the only thing I don't know if we need to mention is we set the agenda for the working session for next week at last meeting, so that wasn't going to come up again later in the meeting. But we had discussed having more discussion about that
On the 20th.
stormwater on the 27th during our board working session.
Yeah, I think that's good. Thanks for mentioning that. So we will publicly warn that appropriately to have something specific to the, that environmental study and Rick Marcotte land matter. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, master planning and visioning.
So we're definitely a little ahead of schedule,
Which is
which is
good.
unusual, maybe for some, but, so we have Lee Dorr here tonight, and I want to just, again, Brian, you were not here, I don't think not at the last, but when we previously had Lee here to look at 5 options, and it was a fairly lengthy conversation last time. So Lee's here to walk us through all 8. We have a series of things, both working sessions and then visioning meetings set up here in the near future. The one thing I want to say before I turn it over to Lee is that we've also, Corey Burtnick, who is now our communication person, has been spending an exorbitant amount of time on our webpage. And so you will find gone live just now, just moments ago, with a lot of the new information around a master planning. So that tab has really been, kind of refreshed and updated, and I think people will find it helpful. And I want to make sure that anyone who's listening to us tonight will know to go to the webpage. Certainly listen to this presentation, but go to the webpage as well. So welcome, Lee.
Sure. Glad you guys are ahead of schedule. There's a lot of ground to cover here, and I apologize in advance. The group has been working awfully hard. Just a kind of overview of what we want to go over tonight is just an overview of kind of the master plan process that we've been going through. Outlining of the options that we've developed to date, some evaluation criteria that the working group and others are using to kind of evaluate these options against each other. And I'm going to go through each of the options, there's 8 of them, and talk briefly about next steps. So the big picture, we actually started on this endeavor back in 2017. And that work was related to, bringing in a full design team and engineers to look at the existing buildings. What are we starting with? What is the condition of the physical building, and what improvements would need to be made? Kind of our baseline as we start this process, and putting some cost estimates to that. Phase 2 that we've been working on, over the last 6 months or so, really started to delve in deeper into educational programming. What is the program desired by the district for the next 50 plus years? Certainly, we all know education has changed significantly since these buildings were designed. And we've spent a lot of time going around to look at other new buildings and spent a lot of time kind of reflecting about what we want to be doing moving forward. So the big questions, and I just want to keep centering us on this, what are we trying to answer in this part of the study? Because there's certainly going to be further planning efforts. But what we've done is we've come up with these idealized space programs for both the middle school and the high school to serve the community for the next 50 years. And space programs is just a listing of numbers of classrooms and sizes and auditoriums and all of that, so we can kind of start putting together plans. And we want to take those programs and say, how do we translate those and what could they look like in a building form? And can we fit them on our site? Because we have an existing site and we've got 2 buildings and we've got to keep schools moving. And then if we were to move forward with something, how would we actually execute the construction phase and keep everybody operational? And that's a big piece of all of this. How much is it going to cost? And then hopefully, picking an option to, move forward with. And there's still a lot of planning work to do with one of these. The outline of the options, I mentioned option 1, which is our base, which is just a capital improvement plan only. We've gone through kind of soup to nuts in the buildings and said to set these buildings up for the next 50 years from a code perspective and an infrastructure perspective only, what would it take? And what is the cost of that? In option 1, there's no changes to educational space, right? All of the existing walls, everything stays the same. Option 2, we start jumping in a little bit further and we take care of all that stuff that we talked about in option 1, and we're going to start looking at some of the priority issues that were mentioned to us through this process educationally at both of those buildings. Option 3 is a renovation and addition at the middle school for grades 6 through 8, and also renovating and adding on to the high school. Option 4 is the same as option 3, but we just wanted to look at if we did bring grade 5 up, what would that look like? Option 5 is a broader reach, and what we're looking at here is renovating and adding on to this building to be able to make it grades 6 through 12, kind of 2 schools operating under one roof. And how would that work? Option 6 is a new high school. It's a renovation in addition to this building. And after the new high school was built, you would demolish the existing high school and put parking and fields there. Option 7, standalone new middle school and new high school. It's the other end of the spectrum from our baseline. And option 8 is that same thing, but keeping the buildings together as a middle school, high school. And what does that potentially look like, and what does that cost? So we've been working on how do we evaluate this, and it's something that's fairly complicated to look at, and as those that have been working in it know, there's a lot of information to kind of work through and sustain. So we have 7 categories that we're evaluating these options against. Education, making sure that the program and the design concepts are student-centered, they support the students and the faculty, that they work on creating some site enhancements. Right now there's a lot of issues with traffic congestion and separation of buses and students, field upgrades, etc. We want buildings that are going to be supportive of the community and inviting to the community and be able to provide the community with uses. Sustainability, green buildings, energy efficiency is something that we've all been talking about. It's certainly important in this project. Logistics and construction I mentioned, and cost. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some of the more detailed look at each of those categories. It's pretty extensive. And this is a process that the working group has been going through after hearing lots of questions and lots of conversation on each of the options. just want to, some points here. This is a long process. What I'm showing you tonight is nowhere near a final design. These are really conceptual. These are kind of one step past kind of bubble diagrams or cocktail napkin sketches. And really what they are trying to prove out is, can we do this stuff on the site and how much is it going to cost? And I will stress, and we've talked about it before, it's easy to dive in a lot deeper than we want to be right now, so we're going to try and keep out of the weeds. Every option has compromises to what our ideal is. And we started this process like this. This is a cocktail napkin sketch. This is kind of when we went through this visioning process, and we had lots of community involved in that, and through our working group and principal workshops, we started to think about how do we want to organize the building in its existing state or in a new state. And so these are just some representations of the middle school, and really these bubbles are really representing keeping teams together. Right now, throughout the existing building, they're spread out all over the place, and it's not ideal. The high school, this was kind of where we started with on that, and it was really, the educational vision here is to create, hubs of learning centers of collaborative programs that should be working together and should be geographically located together. And separation of academic spaces and community spaces was very important. So jumping into the options, you guys are very familiar with the site. I just wanted to highlight in here, one of the things we were looking at is where could you potentially put additions and our new construction? And these were kind of targets we were looking at for the purposes of this part of the study. The track was kind of the sacred cow, and we said, that's fairly recently new. Keep that as it is, work all the way around that. So all of our options try and respect where that's located and works around that and the existing buildings. So this baseline improvement option, it doesn't, as I mentioned, doesn't move any walls, but what we're talking about is, infrastructure replacement, roof, windows, the HVAC, plumbing, electrical systems, handicap accessibility, replacing some of the finishes and the built-in casework that's in the classrooms, paint and finishes. So a lot of the stuff you're going to come in here, it's going to move the building, for the next 30, 40 years forward, but you're not going to really see a lot. It's going to be kind of behind walls and above ceilings, and it's infrastructure related, but we're not addressing any of the educational issues. This would be the second floor plan. And a big piece of what we all need to understand about this building is about 60% of this building has no access to natural light. So students and staff are coming in here their whole day, some of them, they're not seeing any daylight. That's just the way it was designed back in that era, trying to be energy efficient. But what we do know now is natural light is really important to people that occupied spaces. It's really important. There's lots of studies out there how that helps improve learning. So it was high on our priority list of something that we wanted to address. When we just do that baseline scenario, this is part of that execution piece. How do we actually do that? And because we don't have any swing space to move all these students out and provide the space to the contractor, we have to do it in phases. So what we'd be doing here is basically creating a portable classroom village temporarily to be able to rotate students out into those spaces and provide the contractor with portions of the building. This is not, the most cost-effective model, because all of that investment you're making in creating that temporary space, it's on wheels and it just moves away at the end of the project. So these are some of the things that we need to evaluate from a cost-effectiveness standpoint. The capital improvement plan baseline scenario at the high school is keeping everything in place. It's all the same scope, the same assumptions that were made at the middle school were made at the high school. And again, we're not moving spaces around. This is the second floor, and it's basically as is, but we're taking care of the infrastructure issues. High school is no easier to actually execute this plan. Again, it's creating temporary space and then rotating students around. So these are long construction durations. These could take upwards of 3 to 4 years to complete once we get into the detail. Option 2. What we're doing now is we're taking care of everything I just talked about in option 1, but the top priorities at the middle school identified were getting the teams located closer together. And I mentioned they were spread out before. We wanted to deinstitutionalize the cafeteria dining experience. That was an important priority, and there's a need for additional gym space and some reorganization of athletic facilities and locker rooms internal to the building. So we've addressed these three in this, and you can see we've started moving rooms around So you can kind of start to get a sense of, here's a team one where we've got 4 related classrooms, an extended learning area. That's a big piece of the change that we're talking about in the educational vision, is trying to provide space where students and teachers can collaborate together. Right now, the space doesn't really exist in either of the buildings. And that's a really important component of new school designs. We've moved science classrooms a little bit closer. The media center basically stays as is. The cafeteria, we're going to try and change that around a little bit so that there's different areas and different dining experiences within the big space. There is a new addition added down here, minimal, which is to create some breathing room around the gym floor court. For those who've experienced trying to watch a game in there, it can be kind of hectic, but we've added some bleachers as part of that, and the ability to actually be able to walk in some doors here and walk to the bleachers without walking over a court if the game's in session. Up on the second floor, you can see again where you're getting some really clear groupings of teams together. They're not dispersed throughout the building. Band and chorus got renovated and they're closer together. Guidance was moved out of there. There's a movement studio up where the girls' locker room used to be, because we brought the girls' locker room down to the first floor. So this is, a good step towards, trying to identify some of those issues that we have, working basically within the existing framework of this building. And there's a big difference between the design and construction of this building versus across the street. This is a moment frame building, so it's steel construction. Once you peel back all the layers to structure, you've got some flexibility to be able to work with. The walls mostly aren't bearing. Next door, all the walls dividing up all the classrooms, those are all bearing walls. They're holding up the floor above and the roof. So trying to change any of those walls is really expensive. And we had to take that into account when we're trying to put some of these options together. To build option 2 at the middle school, we built that new addition first. But again, there's not a lot of new space there to be able to use the swing, so we've got to go through the same routine of portable classrooms and juggling the students around. And it's pretty close to the same duration. The high school in option 2, and we've made some big moves in where we're trying to look at where we couldn't fit the whole program in that existing container of a building. We needed extra square footage. And the stuff that was really driving that was the gymnasium space that's been cited in the ask over the years. Science labs as well was in here that needed to be worked. So those were the priorities. The cafeteria kitchen has been looked at for the last decade about trying to expand that because there's just not enough space for the amount of enrolled students here. So what we've done in this option is the existing building stops right here. And so we've added a kitchen and cafeteria addition and gym additions. We've also reoriented where the front door of the building is as well. So there's an entrance over here and there's an entrance over here. You'll see why that is when I show you the site plan for this. But we've started to group the classroom spaces, the academic spaces, into these hubs. One of them being leadership, civic life, service, and world language. And then when we go upstairs, we've got what we're really striving to get towards is a STEM center, where we've got science, technology, engineering, and math, and those programs close together. Art close together there, so it's kind of STEM and STEAM related. So in this option up on the second floor, right now, science is up here. We've moved science out and moved art in. We've taken over, right here is kind of where the lobby is right now. So what we do is we go in there and we take over the gym space and we break that into 2 floors and we're moving science into that space. So this is kind of a mezzanine level right here that's in the gym. So it's breaking the existing gym into 2 floors. And that provides science as a central component to the rest of the academic space. And again, there's the gym addition. So it's a modest addition, and option 2 is kind of some middle ground between baseline and the ideal that we're going to try and get to. And feel free to interrupt me. I'm throwing lots of information at you right now. So if you need me to stop and rewind, just let me know. Building this is really complicated, just as some of the other renovations. Is very intrusive. We'd be building, that phase 1 in this kind of gold box, which is the gym and the cafeteria space first. We'd be able to utilize that gym temporarily for some classroom space, So you'd have less portables, but you're still gonna have some of that on the site. So again, this is another 3 to 4 year construction duration project. The site plan looks a lot different than what you have right now. And so here's what I was talking about when we're reorienting this. What we're trying to do right now is separate the confusion out front of bus drop-off and parent loop. So in front of the existing school now, it'll just be a parent drop-off area. We're actually getting rid of that one curb cut, so you come in through where the light is, loop back around and come back out. Buses come in a separate entrance, can loop around, and then they can actually circle on site without going back onto Dorset Street over to the middle school to be able to drop off. We've reoriented the parking lot. Right now that can be a raceway, just the way it's oriented, because you can drive in that front entrance and you can zip right through. We've forced people to be able to kind of change it in a more parallel route to Dorset Street. Sprinkled some parking over here, expanded where that student parking lot is now. And we're able to basically replicate the same amount of fields that you have now. So again, some improvements to the building, to the educational program, to the site circulation features, taking a deeper step from the baseline. Option 3, this is really trying to take care of all of the educational issues that were identified. And so this is quite a bit different from what you have. So this red line right here is where the wall is of the existing gymnasium. And so what we're proposing here is taking down the old gym completely and replacing it with a gym addition, an addition for band and chorus. The cafeteria gets reconfigured. There's a platform stage that has access to the gym or to the cafeteria, depending on the size of the function and what the program is of the function. The big piece of this is opening up the building to natural light. So in this option, we're basically cutting holes in the floor above the cafeteria up to the roof so we can bring light all the way down. There's a large staircase that we're adding, and we call them Heller upstairs. Just remember that word, because I'm going to show you a picture of what that actually looks like at the end of this presentation. But it provides access from the second floor down to the cafeteria. There's seating all the way up the stairs, and this is something that we've been doing in a lot of the new school designs, and they're used kind of more than the cafeteria tables. It's amazing. The media center, where we're in right now, we're going to be doing the same thing as cutting open the floor above us, trying to bring in some light from above, and we reorganize what's above us right now in the science labs. We're really trying to create more of a suite of classrooms feel so that there's really a good team orientation when you walk into the cluster of classrooms for whatever team that you're going into. Each of these has 4 classrooms and a science. It has breakout and collaboration space, space for special educators to be working on team and be able to have pull-out space when they need that private space. It can also be used for one-on-one student work, or if teachers need to collaborate with third parties in a private area, they have that ability as well. There's a couple of additions on here besides this. It's a pretty major reconfiguration of the front entrance. So there's a new lobby. We're kind of sliding the lobby administration, moving those across from each other. And we're adding an addition here to be able to get arts closer to the classroom spaces. And the last option, you remember, art was way over here. On the second floor, it's similar. Again, you can see what we've done with trying to get light in. So there's no kind of program space in here. This is roof above. There'll be skylights in the roof, the same at the media center. There's overlook from these extended learning areas down inside. There's a connection now between the 2 floors, when right now they're very isolated. And so you end up in a 6-8 configuration with 6 teams, 4 on the top floor and 2 on the bottom floor. Option 3, again, is similar at the high school, where we're taking a further step to try and solve all those educational issues that were brought to our attention. So this is a much more major intervention into the high school. And I mentioned the construction over there. You got to pick your poison on which side. There was 2 vintages of that building, and they're both not really flexible for expansion. So what we've done here is we've basically, at the lobby, at the staircase going up to the gym or down into the cafeteria, from there south, we've taken that whole rest of that building down. And so this is replacing it with a full addition. So similar to what you saw before, we've kind of got a kitchen cafeteria arrangement in the gym, lockers and associated athletic spaces. This is a big move. Right now, the existing auditorium seats about 400 kids. And one of the things that was come up in the program is we need extra seats and a stronger performing arts space. So this is actually sized for 750 seats. With a full fly stage, keeping chorus and band and theater tech close to the stage so you have access to be set design and be able to get them in. Music classrooms to be able to get to the stage. The geography works well. And again, we've reorganized these classrooms. So the compromise here is, like I said, all these little walls between those classrooms, that's all bearing walls. As soon as we touch that stuff, it gets really expensive. So the existing classrooms are undersized from where we want them, and for state standards, they're at about 725 to 750 square feet now. We'd like to see those at between 850 and 900 square feet. That's a compromise in this plan, just because of the expense of what it would take to move those walls. So you can see we were kind of a choice of, do you take it all down just because of that problem, or you try and do an increment? So this is another increment of trying to solve some of those problems. Up on the second floor, the science wing has been completely renovated. We've clustered math and science together, so it's a STEM. We've converted the auditorium into a 2-story high volume space that is a STEM lab that has view from upstairs to downstairs. It's got a staircase right next to it to be able to integrate the 2 floors. And really you're trying to tie all those programs together. So there's a considerable amount of work in doing that and renovating the auditorium. But from a program standpoint, the size has worked out well. And again, we're building the new auditorium space. Option 3 site plan is similar in concept. It's just a little bit different footprints of the building. We've introduced, some parking over here, in improving what the existing, that's kind of the mud season, Martin, that we have over in South Burlington, is that back parking lot right now. But you can see in these kind of the darker spaces, right, those are additions, and the lighter space is the existing building. So it's a similar concept of being able to move stuff around. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to build this. And again, it's a little bit better because we're building more new space that we can temporarily use while we're renovating other areas. But there's still a need for some temporary classrooms in this. So it's a little bit shorter duration than some of the previous options. Option 4 is exactly what I just showed you for the middle school, except for we looked at what would it take to bring 5th grade up. So that art addition that we put on got a little bit bigger. There's a courtyard in between, and we have a team on the bottom floor, and we have another team on the upper floor. So that could be used if there was ever any consideration to bring the 5th grade into this program. And so we've kind of proven out we know how much it would cost, we know how it would integrate educationally with the rest of the building, and how we would build it. Option 5 is looking at 2 schools under 1 roof. So it's similar to the option 3 plan for the middle school, where we've got new art addition on here. Where we had the gyms, we've slid them down. So these are middle school gyms here. And then this whole space, this is all new high school. And it's built right in back here on the varsity baseball field. So that's all new construction. There's new gym space, locker room space, kind of the health program back here. Again, the 750 seat auditorium and the related spaces. There's a cafeteria in here, new library media center, and these are two-story wings housing the STEM program and the leadership and civic life programs in 2 separate wings, tied together with art right in between them. So there's a separate entrance for the high school, separate entrance from the middle school. They can completely run autonomously, but you're getting some economy of scale in operations, and you're getting some economy of scale in the ability for teachers to collaborate from 6 to 12. And there's a lot of interaction that happens from people going back and across the parking lot right now. The center of the building, right at the front door, is kind of the big picture program, business center, kind of at the heart of the school. This one was a challenge to see, can we fit that much program space and actually build it back out there and fit. The second floor of that space, is similar to some of the other things that you see. This is the second floor of the academic wings. And the other nice thing about this is it's pretty easy from a public use standpoint after hours to be able to segregate and close off academic wings from where the community use could be for the auditorium and the athletic spaces and meeting space, which is a little bit harder to do in the existing building right now. You get access to pretty much the whole school. Here's what that site plan would look like. So here's the middle school. This is that large high school addition. We've got a bus loop that we're extending across the back here to serve both the middle school, continues on, loops around to drop off the high school and comes out. So there's some parking in here. There's a little service entrance back here, but mainly that's the bus side. And over in the middle of the site is where parent drop-off area would be. You can see the outline footprint of the old high school. Once that comes down, you replace that with fields to kind of get back to net neutral of where you are today. Actually, I think we got one extra in this. Again, trying to stay away from this, and you can see we're kind of shoehorning this program to be able to make that work. So this has some merit, I think, educationally and from a construction standpoint. This gets a little bit easier. The construction period gets a little bit faster because you can basically, now you're creating full swing space. You keep everybody in that existing high school while you build the new one. When it's done, you flip them over. Then you move the middle school into the old high school. So this building is vacant. They can have at it all at once. It definitely condenses the construction schedule and it saves on cost. Option 6 is looking at, again, that middle school plan you've seen. I'm not going to spend time going through that again. But also, this is a new standalone high school component. And this one was just to satisfy the question of, do we really want these things connected, middle school and high school? Can you have them close together but independent buildings so they have their own autonomy? So from a site perspective, you can see it looks similar to the last one, but yet a little bit different. They're just pulled apart. We weren't sure, just our own opinion on this one, if you went this way, why not just connect them and be able to deal with this piece? But it's something we wanted to make sure that we explored and have some answers for the community. The phasing is basically the same as what I just showed you in option 5. Option 7 is new middle school and a new high school, standalone buildings. So now we've got a blank canvas and we can basically create the ideal middle school program. So we've got 2 teams over here, all of the collaborative spaces and teacher planning spaces and project areas and maker spaces for the kids to be able to work on. Each of them is adjacent to some outdoor learning areas, which is a big piece of what people wanted, was to be able to have some classroom space that's outside that can be used appropriately. It's the heart of the school is the media center. This is the main entrance coming in. So the media center, cafeteria and kitchen, gymnasium space, and here's another academic wing, which is basically a mirror image of the other side. Upstairs, this could work for 6-8 or 5-8. This happens to be 6-8. If it was 5, we'd basically replicate what we're doing over here. Since this is 6-8, these are the arts programs. We got some media center space above as well, so it's kind of a 2-story library, so it connects both floors together. And again, this works well from a community and academic separation. The high school, we kind of kept along with this program. We've had to reorient the classroom wings a little bit to make that fit on the site, where I'll show you in a little while. But essentially, it's the same theory behind this as trying to get the related programs close together in the academic wings. Same thing on the second floor. And again, at the high school, we're getting these little green splotches are outdoor classroom spaces that are directly related to programs next to them. What that looks like on site is we actually trying to fit this stuff in. The high school was bigger and we couldn't fit it behind the existing high school. There's some wetlands back here. We've got some topography issues that, you know, where it changes and it drops off at that back field that we'll have to work through. But the high school fit pretty nicely behind the middle school because we already went through that exercise. Phasing works pretty clean because you can keep both of the buildings up and running while you're building new ones behind them and then make the switch. You can also do these as two separate projects, do one after another consecutively. So there's some flexibility here and some options, and obviously we were able to meet all of the educational desires. And here's that phasing plan. This will be the shortest construction duration between the two. Option 8 was, let's do that same thing, look at a new middle school and high school, but connect them. And again, that's coming back to the educational vision of there's some efficiency here. And in this particular one, because it's new, we could actually get some of the economy of scale where we have one mechanical room serving both buildings. We have one kitchen serving 2 cafeterias. And you've got everybody kind of under the same roof to be able to go back and forth. Yet at the same time, we can provide some clear separation. And this is kind of that line right here between middle school and high school. So there would be some doors in there. You can keep them completely separate. It's up to the administration and the community what they want to do. But you have the ability to make it, you know, really a cohesive 6 through 12 program or independent. I'm going to blow these up here for you. So you can look at the high school component. You've seen this arrangement. It's a little bit different just because it's oriented different on the site, but it's the same kind of theory of, you know, separating the academic spaces from the core public spaces. Same thing on the second floor. The middle school line, and it's hard to read all of this, but you know, here's a central kitchen, right? Here's the middle school cafeteria. The high school cafeteria is up here. They're separated. Shared mechanical space for both of them. Separate athletic space for both of them. It works pretty nice. It's a big building. And we tried to take that footprint, and there's not so many places that can fit on the site. So this one was built right on top of the existing high school footprint. And the way we would accomplish this is in phase 1, we would build this new middle school and the 2 academic wings for the high school. Once that is complete, you know, we'll move the middle school kids in. We'll move the high school kids over to the middle school as swing space. They're going to be split between this building and right next door on the academic wings. There's lots of detail that needs to be worked out how that works. But again, this is about as fast as the one I just showed you, which was 2 brand new buildings. And speed is important. You know, anyone that's lived through renovating their house or living through a construction site, it's a lot going on the site, and there's a lot of, you know, potential for educational distraction. And it certainly is a cost issue. The faster we can build it, the less it's going to cost. So these are all important considerations. Could this be moved somewhere else? You know, we started talking about this in our office and said, if that wasn't the sacred cow, I'd actually suggest we push this whole thing back here and move the track and field out into the front. So there's some options there, and you got to weigh those things about, you know, cost. You could probably do it even faster if you built it in the back and you didn't have that overlap with the existing building. But those are details that we can talk about. Again, I went through the phasing. It's pretty quick compared to some of the other ones. So I just threw 8 options at you pretty quick, which took us 6 months to review with everybody else. So I'm happy to answer some questions. We have a presentation next week from 7 to 9 where we've invited the visioning crew that came out. I think it was about 80, 85 people that were with us initially that worked through some of what do we want to be, you know, over the next 50 years. And so we're going to bring this work back to them so they can see it. We're planning, I think, a piece of your workshop to be able to come back and talk to you about this in more detail, and certainly a lot of public forums to be able to get some feedback. So we're not making any decisions yet. We're just presenting some information, trying to get some feedback. We're going to have some costs to go along with this that we'll share at the visioning session and the public sessions that follow. And one thing we like to do is kind of evaluate these options on their own merit educationally and kind of score them that way, and then look at the cost and see if that changes your mind on any of these things. So we'll see how that process works. So happy to answer any questions you guys have.
stepped out, Lee, on the light options, light transfer, particularly in this school. Is that, you could cover that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a big piece. There's obviously all the new options take care of the natural daylight issue. I think once you get past up to option 3, we start taking care of the daylight issues where we start opening up and getting, natural daylight. And that's what we're striving to do, is getting a view and natural daylight into every occupiable space. That's the way that schools should be, and that's the way they're currently designed.
I assume, Lee, the initial baseline options really reflect what would be required over time regardless for normal maintenance and replacement and things like that, because it looked like you covered all.
So your extended capital improvement plan that you're working on, you're dribbling out over years, this basically is taking a proactive step to say, let's deal with all this now, extend the life of the building. That's what we're doing. Extending the life of the building, code upgrades, and bringing the building up currently to current codes, and increasing the infrastructure. So you're gonna get value and life out of the building, you're just not taking care of your educational needs.
Is there in the cost analysis, is there any sort of netting out of the kind of those baseline investments that would be required anyway over time?
We will be analyzing that, kind of taking that, saying if you were trying to do what we're showing in option 1 and spreading that out over years, it's actually gonna be much more costly than if you're trying to tack it all as a project. The big thing about this is the price of construction never goes back the other way. It's increasing basically at 4 to 5% every year. And we're talking a lot of square footage. And that's one thing to take into context, is you can look at these things, but the program right now is at 365,000 square feet for both buildings. It's a lot of square footage. You're talking about 2 schools, you got about 1,600 kids is the design enrollment for this stuff. So when you think about spreading that work out over that much square footage, and you spread that out over a 20-year period, it gets really costly. And if you're just doing it kind of one-off stuff over the summer, it's gonna drag out for a long time. But we'll be analyzing that and being able to say, if you do it all at once, here it is over, if you're taking a bond out over 20 years versus dribbling this out and keeping it in your operational budget, which is 2 different animals too.
Right. Other questions?
So I have a question now about the options, and I apologize if you spent an earlier meeting this year that I was unable to attend. Just the evaluation criteria and such, as far as making sure that we've defined what each of those criteria are, and I'm not sure if that has been done, and which criteria are most important. If there's been a weighting of the criteria. I again apologize if I've been out of the loop as far as that discussion, but.
So it's really hard at this level of design to really get in and look at spaces and get really into the finite details of it. So at this level, and what's represented up here is, we kind of look at this from a Consumer Reports comparative analysis and looking at options compared to each other and how they satisfy the 7 driving needs that we talked about. And looking at them, which one works the best on site circulation, right? That's going to get a certain score. Which one meets the educational needs, holistically versus in increments. And we'll be able to have a graduated score so you can see relative to each other where they stack up. And that's one analysis tool to be able to look at. And then you got to step back and more of the subjective view of what makes sense. And what we're trying to do is, we can't carry all 8 of these options to a level of detail to be able to analyze all of the little pieces. So we're trying to give you some comparative analysis tools to be able to say, what makes sense, renovation addition, is it 6 to 8 and 9 to 12 separate? Are they together? Where are they located on the site? How do they impact education in the long run? There's a lot of those factors that we're kind of wrestling with right now on the working group, is trying to be able to match these up against each other. And certainly cost is going to influence that as well.
Yeah, it's just that I did try to run through the criteria, and I felt I was unable to rank most of the things there as well, so
It-
that's a separate issue, and that may be who is doing the ranking, and if we're making sure we're getting the right people with the right expertise as well.
It's,
to do that.
it's hard if you just took this snapshot and said, Martin, go have at it.
Right.
There's a lot of back and forth conversations that we've had at the working group level to be able to answer some of those unknowns as best that we can. And it is hard if you're just coming into this in the middle of it, taking on 6 months of work to try and figure out some of those nuances in between them. And it's not an easy thing at this stage and at this level of done to try and figure out which is the best route forward. And I think you got a pretty broad range of options to consider.
Yeah.
Parnell and Cole, any early reactions to these options?
My initial question was literally like, how would the portable classrooms look? Like, how would that structurally work?
So we've had to do that before where we've actually, taken 1,000 student high school and they said, we don't want to do this in phases. We want to actually take all of those students and we create a whole portable village, right? And they're basically like mobile trailers that come up. Each one is a classroom. You stack them all together and you build ramps connecting them all and they got bathrooms outside.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like a literal village, yeah.
It's like a literal village.
Literal.
That's what it takes.
Okay.
And it's very expensive to do that, as you
Yeah.
can see, because it's all gotta be code compliant and handicap accessible. And then once you're done, all that stuff just goes away. So we really try to avoid doing that at all costs. And so usually the better techniques are to build some swing space, create new addition, be able to move kids in there temporarily and then move them back, but it's still all the space that you paid for, so it's not money
Yeah.
going out the door.
This just could have been my misinterpretation of the diagrams, but in the middle school, like the newer ones, I didn't necessarily see world language classrooms. I didn't know if they were like considered extended learning or.
One of the 4 classrooms.
Okay.
At the middle school level, so math, English, social studies, world language, and a science.
So I guess my follow-up, because at the middle school level, we have the option for Spanish or French, but like with that 4th classroom, they would, I guess like, this was probably a logistical thing that happens later, but, because one of the things that you had talked about is keeping everything on team and keeping it within the team, but if a student's taking French and they're Spanish, like it's not necessarily within the team, but I guess that's something that, it's like taking chorus. Of course, your chorus isn't going to be within your team, so.
Yeah, sometimes we've seen that where, one team is their world language is French, the other team, their world language is Spanish, right? And it's depending what your interest level is to what teams that, you're enrolled in.
Okay.
So there's lots of different ways to do that.
Yeah. Why don't you go to 3 floors? Save ground space.
You could, and we looked at that a little bit, and part of that is getting the right amount of program and related space that you're keeping them on the same level. You don't want to split, and end up with science upstairs and math downstairs. So you have to have the right critical mass of square footage to be able to do that. And so when we started stacking that up 3 stories, we were getting some missing teeth in there where we, didn't have enough program to fill out an entire floor, or you didn't have the right amount of classrooms to be able to make that up. Not to say that that couldn't be explored further, in one of these options as you go to try and reduce that footprint. But our initial takes at it it was pretty hard to make that work. I think in the high school where those 2 academic wings were, there's more opportunity there to potentially get 3 floors out of it. But it's gonna take further design exploration to see how you move all those parts around to get it to work.
It sounds like 2 floors is the magic number for constructing a school.
It
Is that right?
Yeah, we've done 2, we've done 3, we've done 4. It depends on what you have for available site. And you're trying to weigh that, it's how much of the site do we be able to take? And that's a compromise of, if we have a restricted site, we try and stack up more, but then compromise is we're not gonna have all the programs directly related to where we want them ideally. So those are just things we have to talk about. This more was a truth test. Can you fit the worst case scenario, 2 stories on the site? And that's what we were trying
Yeah.
really prove.
Thank you.
I was just curious how it was decided that the track was a sacred cow. Is that just because it just happened and, you know, it feels bad to build something and tear it right down?
To challenge us even more,
Yeah.
to try and get that to fit. What we try and take is like the worst case scenario and truth test this stuff. So that is the worst case scenario if we've got 2 existing buildings and that right in the heart of, you know, how do we make that work? If that was a decision that says, you know, you guys can have freewheeling over there to be able to make that work, as I said, I think we would change some of the things that we're doing. So it depends on, you know, picking an option and moving forward. There's, you know, a whole nother planning phase that you gotta refine all of this stuff and make it make sense.
What was that feedback at the community sessions? Like, we really don't want to touch?
That was me.
That was you? Yeah, okay.
That was me saying, we just spent over $1 million, you know, rebuilding the track and the turf field and all of that. And from a community perspective, it's pretty hard to say this brand new track is just gonna go away. Realistically, the amount of money that we're talking about, if we take one of the options where we're really building a lot of new construction, $1 million, you know, it's a lot of money, but in comparison to what you're doing, probably not. But for the outset, we tried to keep that where it is because we've already put so much effort and money and
So
time
it
and
feels
thought.
bad, yeah, and it's hard to
Yeah.
justify, yeah. Okay.
It sounds to me, Bridget, like, I mean, some of these projects, you know, trying to protect the track and the $1 million investment we've made in the past year might cause the construction cost to go up by more than $1 million. Isn't that a possibility?
It could, and that's what we gotta look at through the cost estimating exercise, is that the cost, the extra cost for phasing and moving those students around because we're trying to avoid the track, is that more expensive than what it would be to replicate the track?
Exactly, and that's a good question to
Yep.
ask.
A question that I have, because I know we just had a bond that is supposed to put in a new bathrooms and stuff at the track. So if we were to put, like, this is another logistical thing, like on our side. Why am I talking like that? But, like, so I guess with that, is that included in the sacred cow, even though, or are we like not putting, are we pushing that off because we have
That little
the,
building right there,
okay.
right, we were trying to avoid that as, that and the rest of that track as much as possible.
All right.
And so what we've proven to ourselves is, yeah, we can do that in a lot of these different options. But if that was off the table, could that change anything and be more cost effective? And it's hard because you really need to think of what's, after everything's done, right, and everybody forgets what was there, does it make sense what you're left with? And is the building located on the site in the right place? Is it optimized for natural daylight and the orientation of the way it's set up? So all of these things we're trying to factor in at the same time. And we took a lot of that into consideration now, trying to avoid it. If it was on the table, you know, we'd come back and we'd have some different stuff to be able to talk about. It's the same for the investments that you've made in the elevator in this building, right? It's only a few years old. What we did over at the high school, you know, so some of those options, we looked at that and said, you know, there's sacred cow number 2 and 3. How many options can we do to be able to, you know, save that investment? And what compromises are made to what we're trying to do by doing that?
Well, and conversely to that, when you look at the baseline plan and you look at changing regs, it's like how many investments like those might you look at in the future that you have to preserve
Right.
before you make those decisions too?
Yeah. And that's the big thing with the baseline plan, and in every community I'm in, we do have to do that option. And everyone really has to think about it's a significant number. And if you're saying, we're investing this amount of money to make our building last 50 years, but we're not touching any of the educational spaces to go for the next 50 years. And think of how much they've changed since those buildings were designed, how much education has changed. And if you leave that for another 50, you know, is that a wise investment? So those are things that all have to get weighed.
Noah?
Will the new plans, this may be preemptive, but like, will the new planned buildings be more flexible than the buildings that we have now?
Yeah, so we, you know, would still.
Like not low bearing.
That's the key in everything, right? Because, you know, if you look at education over the last 100 years, right, you know, the pendulum swings back and forth on what the delivery method should be.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do is be able to design for that unknown, right? So what we would make sure is we don't paint everybody into a corner and you have a structural system that's flexible. So if you need to change,
Yeah.
10 years because something radically new changes, you're not spending, or have the problems that we do over there of being completely inflexible.
Any
Well-
other comments or questions?
Thank you, Lee.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hope to see some of you guys next week, and we'll have a little bit more time to dive into this stuff a little bit deeper, but thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Great. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 9, policy work.
So we have three. First one is Ed Records, which is warned for action, and then the other two are second readings, both security cameras and pupil privacy rights. So I don't know if there's any specific questions. I now don't remember that we had any changes from the last one on the Ed Records.
I'll move that we approve the education records policy F1.
Second?
Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great.
All right, that's approved.
Next is security cameras. And we made some changes here. I'll quickly just highlight those. We added in law enforcement, and then we were clearer around the statement that was on number 2, utilizing to ensure student, staff, and community safety. And then the other is law enforcement. We added and then also included the approval process, which is currently part of our procedures, that both police and superintendent or designee have to give, approval. And then number 4, the video recordings similarly. So I don't know what questions you have related to those changes. Again, this is a second reading.
I'm just thinking of the issue that Noah raised 2 weeks ago, when it looks like the initial intent was changed for administrators not to use video recordings, and it's been changed to use them. And I don't know if he just stepped out and is coming back and he can clarify his concern, but it does still seem like there's been this change from the initial position.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, we just feel like this is an important part of that we have available to us to ensure the safety and welfare of students and staff.
And so the initial position was sort of just a mistake, or a...
Yeah, I think that the original intent, and maybe the way it's worded here, is to investigate misconduct and incidents. I was under the impression it was to investigate misconduct related to student, staff, or community safety. It wasn't sort of two separate items. I thought that's what the change might come back as.
Well, I think we wanted to also include incidences, just because of the fact that some incidents could be significantly concerning to safety that may not be a misconduct, but maybe just a concern around student or staff safety.
So do you
So the
need misconduct at all? I mean, does incident
Well, I think-
include misconduct?
No, I mean, we went back and forth on this last time, right? You remember? Around.
No, I do.
And so if it was only incidences, then we're investigating just incidences, and should be specific to a misconduct. So the fact if it's only misconduct, then you can't really do anything with the video recording if there's a concern for safety.
Mhm.
It may not be a
No, I
misconduct.
was saying, wouldn't misconduct be included in incidents if you just got rid of misconduct? Well,
No,
let me ask you a different question.
that was
Let me
what
slightly
that wasn't
different.
there before.
Yeah, is it misconduct that is related to student, staff, or community safety? Is that the idea? Because
That was my impression at the
it's-
last discussion.
it's ambiguous if that's the case, because right now it reads as misconduct separately, and then only the incidents are related to the student, staff, or community safety. At least
No,
that's
it
the way
should
it
be
reads.
included. It should be both, right?
Right.
Not and.
Well, it's sentence construction to make clear that both misconduct and incidents are modified by related to student, staff, or community safety.
Mm-hmm.
So that will have to be, my
Mhm.
brain's not working well enough to give you a suggestion on how to accomplish that, but.
The other thing that I was confused about, if we're talking about misconduct, to me sort of reads as sort of an administrative investigation of something that happened within the school. And the way this sentence reads now, it sounds like we would need both approval from South Burlington Police as well as from you, David, or your designee, which to me felt odd if it's a staff investigation, you know, if it's some misconduct, you know, within the building that's an internal district issue to start with. I didn't know that we really wanted necessarily to have that have to have approval from South Burlington Police, because you could easily see an internal investigation that went no further than, you know, reviewing the video and saying, oh, this is not what we thought it was, without having to drag the police into it. I don't know if that was the intent.
Yeah, I think there are some controls here that we wanted to make sure were significantly adhered to, and the fact of the matter is that we have, you know, school resource officers that are available to us, you know, readily, and the police department is close by and connected. You know, we've felt that this is a really good kind of a gatekeeper to not overusing the video, you know, recordings. And so that's really been the impetus. If it was a difficult, I mean, it doesn't preclude us to investigate misconduct or incidences without the use of the cameras. We do that now. This is really specific to the video recordings, you know, and how we access and use those. And I want to be careful that we aren't just, that an administrator or designee is using the video recordings in a way that's not appropriate, you know. And what I mean by that, you know, not looking at every little thing. Again, we're wanting this to be a place of learning, and we want to be trusting of our staff and our students and not wanting to always rely on the video. That said, if we do, then I'd like it to make sure there's some pretty clear processes in place. And, you know, there's been some times currently where we'd say, I don't see the need for that, or the police chief has done the same. Not current police chief, but in the past, we said, no, that doesn't meet it.
So there is experience where the designee from the police department would say, no, that doesn't meet the criteria.
Yeah, we have in the past.
Because I mean, my recollection of the original discussion here was really the concern that cameras be used for sort of student disciplinary matters that otherwise would be almost the Big Brother watching type thing, and that otherwise would be handled through normal administrative channels. And I think that's what was trying to be avoided. And I think it's not clear to me that that isn't being avoided yet, other than you suggesting that there's another approval level that would be required. Is that a fair interpretation?
I guess I have to reread this in a few different lenses. I mean, I think things have changed since the onset of when we first established the policy. So I just want to be clear about that. We were, back in those days, very clear about only if it was a significant concern of, concern that would push it to the police to also approve. As a result of being a more safety-conscious community, given the kind of current, societal issues that are going on, that's part of what I'm feeling that needs to be wound into this. I don't want to open it up where it's just, anyone can. So again, the same protocol, I think, is in place. Again, I'm likely not being really clear in understanding where you're at.
Can I ask again why we can't strike misconduct and just have investigating incidents?
Well,
That takes care of that disciplinary concern. And if you do want to look at this for disciplinary issues, I would put misconduct in a separate sentence. Because
I think we had incidents before, and it was discussed that it really needed to be misconduct. I think it was 2 meetings ago. We wanted to have included misconduct, because incidences was the,
Well, I think the
Right.
modifier that we've said was if something is related to student, staff, or community safety, then you have this screening criteria through administration and through the police that video recordings could be investigated. So the modifier, in my opinion, was intended to be a safety issue related to those groups. And,
so it's less important of the
yeah, the
the misconduct
misconduct.
is less important because of the check. Whereas, right?
Well, it's more subjective in terms of what constitutes that versus a safety-related issue.
Yeah, so maybe incidents is better,
Yeah, I think
because we have,
it's just, I think, confusing having misconduct there,
Okay.
unless you really want to go after disciplinary, and I don't know that I would agree that
Yeah,
we
then it
should do
makes
that.
sense.
So I would strike misconduct and,
Yeah, if there's, I mean, if you're
Makes
thinking
sense.
of
I'm-
things, David, that fall out, that misconduct, that incidents alone wouldn't cover, I think that's important to know what
Gotcha.
those are.
I'm starting to understand where you're coming from. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? So this will go on for a
Yep.
third reading?
Yeah, with those changes. Next is pupil privacy rights. A big part here, we added obviously parents, guardians. And this also had some things specific to the request for parent and guardian to access such surveys before completion by a student. Some clarity there. Parent, guardian throughout. It's really the main changes to that. Again, this is a second reading as well.
Any questions or comments on those modifications? All right, so we'll move that forward to a third reading?
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, negotiations update. Bridget or Martin, anything on support staff?
I think, yes, since we've met, we've had one more meeting with them, just continuing to discuss the proposals on both sides. And we have another meeting scheduled for April 1st with them. That's our next meeting with them.
All right. Bridget and I are going to give an update on the status negotiations with the SBEA. As of Monday, we have met about 10 times with the Teachers Association representatives. At this point, Bridget and I are going to make a recommendation tonight that the board moved along the statutory process of moving to impasse, which really requires that we bring in some support to kind of move us along through the process. In large part, that is driven by the current contract that calls for the issuance of having a fact-finding report in hand by June 30th. And if you start to back into the time to prepare that, to have a hearing with a fact finder and prepare the report, that's probably about a 6-week process. And mediation is required prior to that process. So as we look at trying to get that in hand, and then the historical experience that typically there isn't a lot of activity that goes on over the summer, and I know all parties are interested in having a settled agreement prior to the start of the school year. That would be, in large part, the recommendation that we'd make to the board tonight. I don't know, Bridget, if you want to expand on some of the current status?
Sure. So the current status and a few of the bullet points that have kind of driven us to decide that it's time to move to this next step in the negotiating process is that we're still pretty far apart on two of the major concerns, which are salary and healthcare benefits. So right now, the most recent proposal that the board put on the table proposed a salary increase of 2.01% across the whole population, and proposed that healthcare would basically stay status quo. So it would be 80% paid by the district in terms of premium, 20% by the teachers, and that out-of-pocket would stay the same as it has been for the past year. And in contrast, so the total proposal that we have on the table right now would increase compensation in terms of total dollars by 3% for this 1 year. In contrast, right now, the most recent union proposal has wages increasing by 5%, total compensation increasing, inclusive of both wages and healthcare benefits, increasing by 6.4% total for this 1 year contract. So we feel like we're pretty far apart still in terms of the money issues. There's still a few major sticking points on some other issues, including workday, that we're still sort of struggling to get to a solution on. And we just think that it would be really helpful to have a mediator help us work through some of these issues that we're a little bit stuck on.
Yeah, and I think what we'd like to propose is that we've been meeting about once a month, and we have, collectively, we have an April 10th meeting on the calendar right now. So we'd like to propose that, I know, we'd like to propose kind of that the association identify an acceptable mediator and potentially use that meeting. But I know Bridget and I, as the subcommittee that's been delegated by the board to negotiate this contract, we'd like to kind of extend the invitation to continue to meet, but also to utilize that April 10th meeting to try to identify a mediator to support moving those conversations forward. Any questions or comments?
I appreciate your hard work that the committee has undertaken, and you've met for quite a few hours, both with the SBEA, but also in preparation. And I think it is time to move to getting some assistance from a mediator, from a neutral. Hopefully that can resolve it, but if not, we do have to keep the schedule going and have to at least have the schedule set up so that we can get a fact finder and a fact-finding report in a timely manner if necessary.
Yeah, and
hopefully it won't be
I did fail
necessary.
to say that fact-finding is not a necessary component of the process, the statutory process. It's if a fact-finding report is needed. But if you do back into the timeframes of mediation and the potential necessity to identify and have a fact-finding hearing, that it drives that the need to prepare for that. And in fairness, the past many negotiations I've participated in, we've needed a fact-finding report, or ended up having a fact-finding report.
Well, I just wanted to say, since I'm still learning about all of this, I was grateful to learn, to understand that once you've reached impasse, yes, you can continue meeting. It doesn't mean that you can't keep talking, both parties, you know? I had this idea before that there was cut off and that was that for a while. But to have somebody come along and help you with negotiations, yes, that seems appealing.
So the goal is to get to a mutual settlement.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Noah?
My name's Noah Everett. I'm the president of the SBEA, and I feel that it's really important, given this update, that the SBEA state that we were caught pretty by surprise. So in our last meeting this Monday, when we were given the board's most recent offer, we immediately brought it back and let them know that we were preparing our counter at that time. It was a comprehensive offer. It had new language, not only in the items mentioned, but across all of the different negotiating items. And in our previous sessions, back and forth, item for item, was rejected by the board subcommittee in favor of bringing a more comprehensive offer. So we were a little surprised that at the end of that session, as we told them from the very beginning, we were developing this counteroffer, that the decision was to recommend declaration of impasse. The SBA definitely understands and honors the master agreement, which does state that a fact-finding report with the clause if necessary. And we did feel that the word impasse doesn't change its meaning because there's going to be extra help. It is a side can declare it, and we respect the board's opportunity to say that they don't feel like there's movement to be made. But I do think it's really important that this board and the public know that at the time of impasse declaration, the board was, we were preparing for another offer that has not been seen. So it is difficult for us to understand that idea that no more motion can be made. That being said, I totally recognize that there is a long history here. And I just wanted to address this body and the public to know that the SBA remains committed to bargaining to reach a settlement. But the declaration of impasse will be interpreted as that the board has decided to move along with the process. And it is a process, and that decision does carry that weight. And so we just think that that's an important thing for everybody to know, is that it happened in the middle, in our opinion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alex?
Yeah, is it my understanding that, we're declaring impasse, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to meet with the SBEA? So, we're doing this, but I don't, if there's a counteroffer coming to us, can we still receive it and discuss it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we've also opened the door to have someone help with that. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion on the table?
I'll move that we declare impasse so that we can proceed with the process of getting to a mutually agreeable settlement.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any dissension? All right, the motion passes. All right, let's move on to agenda item 11, other paper articles. I think you've got the list in front of you. And Martin, I think you're next up on legislative
that.
priorities. Are you ready for that?
He's already kind of put an article together. You did a nice handout the
Oh,
other
right,
day.
yeah, I'll just use that.
School construction. Martin's had a really positive impact on the school construction legislation, H 209.
Something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of numbers.
I don't think it's gonna make it.
Yeah.
But it's been a fair amount. I was down testifying along with others around the importance of bringing that back.
Right.
And,
Step one is recognizing the scope of, recognizing there is a problem, which that wasn't really, the education committee wasn't fully aware of that. And then the next step is to understand the scope of the problem, and I think we may make progress on that part. And then, of course, there's actually resolving the problem, which will be the heaviest lift, which isn't gonna happen immediately. But that's the way it works.
I'm really appreciative of Martin's work
So,
to bring it forward.
so we'll do that.
One item.
And Cole, it sounds like you and Arnell will be making progress based on the climate survey.
Yes, we have student council officers going around to interview randomly selected students. That way we have a random sample. And then after we collect those, I believe that the survey will be sent out to the student body. So that way those who want to partake in the survey have the opportunity to. And then those results will help us with our other paper article.
Great, thank you. So we have two other articles that are identified on here. One is the 180 Market Street update or an airport noise update, both of which, David, you updated in your superintendent report, and then a master planning and visioning update as well. It sounds like we could actually have potentially three articles here that might take us into the summer.
Mhm.
And maybe we just need to prioritize those and assign folks. But I suspect that could happen after our sessions next week, because we'll be getting updates on 2 of these items at least. Actually, 3, all 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm happy to put my name down next. Whichever one we end up choosing to do.
Okay. Is there anything else that should be on our list kind of prior to, this will take us through the close of the school year? I can't recall if we do publish during the summer or not.
I think we took a month off last year,
Yeah.
1 or 2 months.
The only thing I was, we're gonna hear in the April meeting from Vince Bolduc on the
Mhm.
outcome of that November.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there may be an opportunity to talk about how to get involved or how to be informed, voter participation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a combined effort that's between city and school, along with student voice to help us to make sure, what do we have, 1,200 votes? 1,500 votes this last round out of 18,000 community members? Maybe there's an opportunity to ask, receive, inform, I don't know.
So maybe we can put as.
Just an idea, I don't.
Kind of the exit poll survey and.
Yeah, and then maybe where do we go from here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to setting the agenda for the April 3rd meeting.
So right out of the gate, we still have not received the audit, and so we're pushing to get it, and we are owed it. But this is under item 11, 2.4, financial conditions, so I'm gonna propose we move that to the April 17th.
Okay.
And mostly due to the audit delay. That will give, once we get it, and we're assuming we're gonna get it soon, and we'll have that then ready. And then the other one, I think, under 6, instead of city-school collaboration, we probably need to add something there. I don't know exactly what that will be called, but something related to the Rick Marcotte Central School parking lot improvements or redesign. I don't exactly know what that will be worded as, but I think we need that to be there. And I'll have to work on the actual wording. Those would be the only things that I would. And let's see, are we bringing back, I gotta make sure we bring back
Got
the,
these 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
what did we do here?
actually, it's security cameras and, yeah.
Yeah,
privacy.
both of them making it, right. I need to bring one back though, don't I?
It's 2 of them are coming back.
Yeah, right, so
Yeah.
I think we're all right.
People probably have
Mhm,
those.
yeah, mhm.
All right, anything else for April 3rd? Will we have any updates for the public on any of the work that's being done at the working session? We've got master planning and visioning covered. The airport noise, do you want to put that under superintendent's
Yeah, I'm not,
mitigation?
yeah, probably should make it identified on its own, or under my report. I'll have to look at that. I mean, it may be that I need to call it on a special item, but certainly we should put noise in here, Chamberlain noise.
And then we will have reviewed the consultant's report
Yeah.
on the stormwater.
Mhm. Yes, I
I
don't
don't know
have
if
that
that
in here, do
timeframe
I?
allows enough turnaround or not, but.
Yeah. So that on the input from the engineer would go under that Rick Marcotte,
Rick
however
Marcotte, okay.
however I
Got
word
it.
that.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right, future agenda items?
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
We've had assessment of how we are doing on there for quite a while. Shouldn't we move that, or at least have a discussion about whether we want to do maybe an annual self-assessment or something to see, what we did well over the past year, perhaps something that happens at the end of the school year. So, after July 1st, we would take a look at it, and perhaps spend the next couple of school board meetings at least trying to figure out some sort of self-assessment where we can say where we did well, where we could have done better.
And certainly try to work it into a future agenda item. No, just put it on there for a conversation and bring some,
Yeah.
for some of you that are new, we had some examples of that we've used in the past. There's maybe some new ones out there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a baseline too would be to get in touch with VSBA and sort of figure out what the recommendations are for board self-assessment through the
May have changed,
VSBA.
yeah. Ask them, yeah. Fine to do that.
So, yeah, why don't we look to use that platform to get it on a
Okay.
future agenda?
So when is the superintendent evaluation coming up again? Should we have that kind of on our radar, or
That should be the May timeframe.
is that May? Okay,
Mhm.
so it is starting to come up.
It's on a calendar, right?
Okay, it is in the calendar,
I believe it is the May
in the
meeting.
master calendar, okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
And we should have it right here with me, but I don't, I think.
We're supposed to be done by May? If that's the case, we should schedule time.
I don't know if it's done by May, but
It just
Okay,
needs to
all right.
be, on
Started.
the agenda, yeah.
you and I talk about that and make sure we have
Mhm.
some sessions on that.
Mhm.
All right, moving on to
Oh, wait.
consider the minutes of meetings. We've got 3 meetings. March 4th was a working subcommittee meeting. Any changes to that?
No.
All right, seeing none, those are approved. March 6th was an executive session, or a regular meeting. No, I'm sorry, that was, regular meeting.
Yeah,
With-
it was an executive session prior to
Yeah.
the board
I was
meeting
just reading it.
on the 6th.
And one at the end, but it's captured in the minutes that there was another one at the end.
Mhm.
Any changes or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, those are approved. And there is another March 11th negotiation subcommittee meeting.
Fine.
Seeing none, those are approved.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Agenda item 15, consent agenda.
So let me just, the retirement of Jan Russell. She's a 1.0 social studies teacher, and her letter is included in there that she will be retiring effective July 1. And again, she's been with us a long time. She's had a tough year with the loss of a child. So it's been a tough year. She's been a great employee and has affected many of our students positively over the years. On your behalf, I'd like to recommend that this be approved and send a letter to her thanking her for her good service.
All right. Do we need to review the,
The bid proposals are in there too, for the snow removal. And because it's staying within the allowable amount, and the pricing that's come back, staying with the same vendor as the recommendation, a $40,000. That's down considerably over the years that we've had in the past.
all right, these do not require action, so unless there's further discussion, those are approved. And on behalf of the board, I will send a note to Jan Russell.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Agenda item 16, AP orders 33 and 34. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, speaking of Howard Center, my curling team on
Yes.
Saturday, the Howard Center
We aren't talking about Howard
Challenge-
Center yet. You've jumped ahead.
Are we at Howard Center?
Not yet. You're coming down to
Oh, I'm
7.
sorry. I was so excited about curling that I had to jump ahead. All right, I'll hold that until we get to the
Seeing
next
no
one.
questions or comments on AP
So having
orders
speaking of
33 and
Howard
34.
Center, Howard Center had a curling challenge on Saturday. 32 teams. They raised a bunch of money for Howard Center. My team won 2 out of 3. My last 4 rocks all went into the house.
And what position were you?
We changed around.
Were you the sweep or
I
where?
was the first and second.
Uh-huh.
My bossy sister from Virginia was, of course, the skip, because one has to be bossy in that. I will move to approve
After
the
that,
payment to Howard Center in the amount of $57,839.22.
Second?
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Can I ask
motion
one
passes.
question, please? Martin, is the skip the person in curling who shouts like their life depends on it?
Yes,
Okay, thank
that
you.
would be my sister.
Okay.
All right, we have a few signatures required.
And I move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.